Some characters are designed to lead the story, others to steal the scene, but every once in a while, one does both, without even trying. Boba Fett was just a handful of lines and a bucket for a face, but changed the course of Star Wars forever. He was barely in The Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi, yet he captured the imagination of an entire generation. And decades later, that quiet, masked figure didn't just return, he inspired a new legacy: Jango Fett, the Clone Army, the Clone Wars, and an entire subculture of Mandalorians. This is the story of how one background bounty hunter reshaped an entire galaxy and left a permanent mark on Star Wars. In this video, we're breaking down how Boba Fett's unexpected popularity led to some of the most important Star Wars stories. From action figures to animated arcs, this is a story of legacy, and you'll want to stick around for all 3 chapters. Chapter 1: The Rise of Boba Fett. When The Empire Strikes Back released in 1980, no one predicted Boba Fett would become a fan favourite. He only had 4 lines, barely moved, and was swallowed by a sandpit in his second appearance. But something about him just worked. The mystery, the armour, the no-nonsense vibe. He was different, cold, efficient, and most importantly, quiet. In a galaxy full of loud heroes and villains, Boba stood out by saying almost nothing at all. He became a cult icon through merchandise. In fact, he was the first Star Wars figure kids could get through a mail-away offer. Fans who barely knew who he was were desperate to own him, and when Return of the Jedi came around, fans were disappointed by his anticlimactic death. That's how much he meant, even with such little screen time, and people wanted more. And George Lucas noticed. Chapter 2: Jango Fett and the Origin of the Clones. 2 decades later, Lucas delivered. In Attack of the Clones, we meet Jango Fett, Boba's father, or more accurately, his genetic template. Jango wasn't just another bounty hunter, he was the source of an entire Grand Army, the Grand Army of the Republic. This was no small retcon. It meant that the entire Clone Wars, the very conflict that shaped the prequel era, stemmed from Boba Fett's DNA. Suddenly, this silent background character had become the blueprint for a galaxy-wide war. And Jango wasn't a throwaway side character either. He had his own arc, from his deal with Count Dooku to his clashes with Obi-Wan, and ultimately his death at the hands of Mace Windu. He wasn't just cool, he was important, and through him we gain insight into Mandalorian culture, bounty hunter honor codes, and the complex morality of cloning. Jango was the first real deep dive into what a Mandalorian could be, and he gave Boba something he never had before: a purpose. Chapter 3: The Clone Wars and Boba's Legacy. The legacy didn't end with Jango. In fact, it was just the beginning. With the release of the Clone Wars animated series, the clones, and by extension, the Fetts, took center stage. Characters like Rex, Cody, Fives, Echo, and many more developed real personalities, even though they were all the same person genetically. That's powerful storytelling. These clones weren't just soldiers, they were brothers, individual, loyal, and tragically manipulated. And every single one of them built from Jango Fett, who exists because of Boba. Even Boba Fett himself appears in the Clone Wars as a young boy who's trying to make his way in a galaxy that took his father. We see his pain, his anger, his slow descent into the cold, calculated bounty hunter we meet in the original trilogy. The show gave him the kind of character development that the movies never had time for. In many ways, the Clone Wars was the ultimate payoff of Boba's popularity, an entire series that spun out of a character who was never meant to be a big deal. And finally, beyond Boba. The legacy doesn't stop there. Because of Boba, we now have The Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett, and an entire cultural obsession with Mandalorians in general. Din Djarin is essentially the modern evolution of Boba, a warrior in armor, shaped by a code, and navigating a shifting galaxy. And while the Book of Boba Fett had mixed reception, it still marked a major milestone. Boba Fett finally got his own show, a leading role decades in the making, from silent background player to the start of the story. So how did one barely speaking bounty hunter change Star Wars forever? By captivating fans before the story even knew what to do with him? Because Boba Fett proved that sometimes the audience decides what matters. He sparked the creation of Jango Fett, he gave us the Clone Army, he fueled the Clone Wars, and he laid the groundwork for some of the most iconic content in modern Star Wars. Not bad for a guy who was supposed to be swallowed by a sandpit and forgotten forever. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that, then hit subscribe so you never miss another Star Wars discussion.